Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, taking another look at Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord. Today I wanted to talk more about the Calradic Empire and the sub-factions therein, because there seems to be a lot of discussion and debate happening on them now that the second Siege gameplay video has gone up. If you haven't seen it yet, it was released during Gamescom, and it shows a Siege defense on the side of the Battanians against the, I believe, the Western Calradic Empire. And so there was a lot of debate about the Western Calradic Empire because for a lot of people they didn't really appear at all like many of us had expected. I was certainly in that group. Some people weren't surprised, or they didn't really have any background knowledge regarding the faction, and so when they appeared very Byzantine, like late Byzantine, as you're kind of seeing in this picture here, a few of them, weren't really surprised, or they were like, oh, well, of course. But, I mean, that wasn't always the case. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. But then there's another more pressing concern that I have about the Calradic Empire that I want to talk about after that. So the reason why many of us were expecting a more Roman look to the Calradic Empire, specifically, the Western one, was because, well, that's what they pitched us with the concept art. And so I've got some examples of that. Here is the first example. So this is right off of Tailworld's website. This is what they were giving us for the Calradic Empire, and this is about as Roman as you can get. I mean, granted, it's late Roman. It's not like a, heavy centurion or anything, but this is, what you'd expect from a Roman legionnaire in the later periods of, like the Western Roman Empire. So this is what many of us were expecting to see. And they have a few other examples of that, such as these here. Again, not quite as Roman as the first, but still very, very Roman looking, especially compared to what we actually see in the game. So that's where many of us had that expectation from. And so in the game we see stuff like this. While not entirely un-Roman, it's a very different look. It's a very Eastern look. And like I said before, it's taken heavily from the Byzantine Empire, probably somewhere around the 11th century, I would guess. Many of you seem to think that, and I would tend to agree. It definitely looks later. I believe in one of the developer journals they said something like the game was going to draw from influences from the 6th to the 11th century, and so there was a pretty wide range there, and obviously they pulled from pretty much the latest possible they could have and still held to that. So we can see that they've got some scale armor here, some like tunics and stuff. The helmets are very Eastern looking. They're sort of like elongated kettle helms. Not the one on this particular soldier here, but in the bottom right corner you can see one. One quick little note I wanted to make on this particular picture, because I had mentioned it when I covered the video, is that I didn't like the scale armor on a lot of the Battanians. It looked too light. And here's a really good example, because if you look at the Battanian soldier on the left with the wolf skin helmet or hood, you can see that the scales on his armor are a lot lighter than the what I'm going to assume is a cataphract soldier in the center. And so I wish they had just gone with a slightly darker look like they did for the Calradic Empire scale, because I think that is a much more realistic looking medal, in my opinion. And a lot of you disagreed with that, which is fine. I mean, that's your opinion. And this is just a minor little nitpick. Obviously, this has very little bearing on the game, just something I would have liked to see. So moving on, we've got more looks at them, and here you can get a better look at some of the tunics and the chainmail and the sort of like gambeson looking tunics that they're wearing. And if we continue on, here we get a better look at some of these helmets. Again, very, very Eastern looking. And then finally we have this look here with some like lamellar and scale hybrid armor, some leather armor over on the left, and then another look at the gambeson or quilted fabric that we've seen so many times. And so, I mean, obviously they're not drawing from the Western Roman Empire, or, the Roman Empire, as many of us like to just sort of shorten that to. This is a very Byzantine look, and again, that's fine. It's just not really what they had shown us from the beginning, and so that's why there was this sort of I don't know, disconnect. Now, the major concern I have with this, and it's not so much with how they look, is that when we had first heard about the Calradic Empire, we knew that they were going to be separated into 3 sub-factions. And so we had the Eastern, the Western, and the Southern. Or some 3 factions, North, West, East, or whatever, however you want to divide them. I believe the final official one is West, East, and South. But anyways, everybody had assumed that those 3 would be visually distinct factions, and what we've found so far is proving that not to be the case. So I wanted to show you guys a screenshot from the end of the video that these are taken from, and we can see on the left of this scorecard here, we've got, various different Imperial units. So that might not mean anything to you guys, but now I want to show you some screenshots from one of the older gameplay videos that we have of Bannerlord featuring the Southern Calradic Empire. And so if we take a look at those, you might recognize this video. We see all the same armors and helmets. Granted, they're now white rather than red, but we see the exact same quilted gambesons, the exact same elongated kettle helms, the exact same kite shields, pretty much all the same gear. Here we see another angle. You can see some of the chainmail armors as well, and many of those tunics look very familiar. And finally, if you look closely in this picture, you can actually see some of the heavier chainmail and scale armors in here as well. And also, obviously, much more of the same, tunics and gambesons. And then if we take a look at the scorecard from the end of that video, we see that, again, we have the exact same units being used. And if you look even closer from this picture and this picture, you'll notice that the icons next to the names are actually identical as well. And so basically what we see here, and this isn't confirmed, but we have no confirmation one way or the other, and so from what we can see, this is implied to be the case, is that all 3 Calradic Empire factions are going to be using the exact same units. And so many people said when we saw that the Western Empire was very Byzantine looking, they went, oh well, maybe the Southern is going to be Western Roman looking. Well, guess what? We're only getting 1 set of Empire units. They're all going to look exactly the same. They're all going to be exactly the same. So no, we're not going to see different flavors between these, which is really disappointing actually. And don't get me wrong, I am still going to be buying this game the moment it's released, whether that's through early access, some form of beta, or just a final release. I am all over this game. I know I'm going to absolutely love it. I know it's going to be a great game. All I'm trying to say here is that many people going into this game with the expectation that there's going to be 3 very distinct Calradic Empire factions are going to be a little bit let down, because while they might have different lords and have their own politics, they're going to be fighting each other with the exact same units, and this could really change up the gameplay, because as you'll know from Warband, when you're trying to fight a faction with their own units, it becomes very difficult because they take morale penalties, and that's something that I would assume is going to be carried over to Bannerlord because it makes sense. And so if you're playing as one part of the Empire fighting against another, you're going to have a really difficult time because there's no real way to have units other than, Empire units, unless you're going to recruit from the Battanians or the Valandians or whoever else is around you. You can't have Empire units and conquer the Empire because you're going to be fighting other Empire units. I mean, you can, it's just going to be more difficult than it would have been. And so there's nothing wrong with that. That's just a whole new dynamic that many people hadn't considered, because back when we were thinking in terms of Western versus Eastern versus Southern, we sort of assumed that the factions were all going to have distinct units, and therefore, their morale penalties wouldn't take place because they're different factions, they're different units. But this is no longer the case, and so I think that adds a really interesting point to Bannerlord, because now there's this whole other discussion: is how is this Empire thing going to work? I mean, that was already a discussion, and I think now it's a little bit murkier than it was before, because many just assumed, you know, it was going to be 3 factions, and they happened to be parts of, you know, an empire. So they would have been like any 3 factions from Warband, they just had Empire in their name. But no, that's not the case. They're actually, you know, basically 3 carbon copies of the same faction that have been just divided on the map. And so that, to me, is a little bit disappointing, because one of the things I was really excited about for Bannerlord is the depth in each faction, because, you know, one of the things they pitched really heavily in those gameplay videos was how deep and how fleshed out these factions were. Now they all had their own like cultures and architecture, which they did to a small extent in Warband. You know, the one building that was enterable had its own like unique architecture and stuff, or the small little city you could walk around in had its own unique architecture. But now they were going to be fleshed out to basically the fullest extent. However, this sort of contradicts that, because you have 3 factions that you literally are cutting and pasting. And again, this isn't confirmed. We don't know any of this for sure yet, but everything that they've shown us to this point is indicating that. And so that's why I'm a bit concerned, and hopefully you guys are too. I mean, again, this isn't game breaking by any means. The game is still going to be a fantastic game, and I can already, you know, say that just based off what I've seen. So don't get me wrong, I don't mean to like rain on your hype parade too hard here, but it's just something that many of us have sort of taken for granted, and I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed when they find this out. Assuming they do find this out, assuming this ends up being the case. So I don't really have much else to say on the topic. I just wanted to sort of bring this to your attention, because this is something that not a lot of people seem to notice in at least the videos that I've done. A couple people did, and we were discussing it in the comments of those videos, but by and large, nobody else really seemed to touch on this. And it is something that I, again, do find a little bit disappointing. Hopefully I'm wrong and this isn't the case, but I will not be surprised if we find out that, you know, the Western, the Eastern, and the Southern empires are all identical. They just happen to be located in different areas and have different, you know, rulers and lords and vassals and such. So anyways, just wanted to kind of throw that out there and see what you guys thought. Looking forward to discussing it with you in the comments. If you haven't seen the new Siege Defense video, I again highly suggest you go watch that. I've also done analysis on it if you want to see that as well. And then if you haven't seen the little bit of news that went along with that, I suggest you check that out as well. It's just a handful of screenshots, most of which I've shown you right here, but there are a few others. I sort of cherry-picked the ones that had the best armor shots, but there are at least, I think, 4 others that I didn't show. And there's also a little tidbit about diplomacy in there, although it's not really anything that you didn't know. They just sort of mention some of the different ways that you can use like your influence in the game, the new influence system, which it was pretty brief. It was like maybe 2 sentences, so it's still worth checking out, but it's not, you know, it's not the end of the world if you don't see it. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I had a great time sharing this little thought with you, and I again look forward to seeing what you guys think in the comments, and I will see you guys back here for my next video.